Welcome to Courageous Dialogues, podcast where I try and get to the heart of the matter with people in your community. In today's podcast, I speak with Sylvia Martinez. She is the co-author of Invent to Learn, and you would know her from Generation Yes and Make a Movement. We talk about pedagogy, makerspaces in schools, as well as encouraging girls to take up STEM opportunities. Thank you so much for coming on to Courageous Dialogues. What I'm tending to do is I'll put the full video version on YouTube, and then I'll try and cut into a podcast because I want them about 15-20 minutes for a drive to work, essentially. But I found that the last few I haven't been able to cut, so I've just left the whole lot. And I've got a feeling that's going to be the case here as well. And did you see my note where I had said that way back when, probably in about 2005 or 2006, I actually dined with you and Gary, and I think even Sir Ken Robinson at one stage, because I remember it was on a few different nights, and I just remembered feeling out of my depth there. Like, who are these people? And I didn't really know, because I was coming into education. I didn't really know who I was sitting with, who I was dining with, and now I look back and just shake my head.
Oh gosh, don't worry.
Do you remember what conference that was? Because my all of my social media doesn't go back that far, and I was trying to...
In Canberra?
In Canberra. And so Julia Gillard actually opened the address. I'm fairly sure that was the one where Julia Gillard opened. Yeah, no, okay.
I remember going to Canberra. I don't remember what conference it was. They all sort of blend together after a while. Conference centers all look alike.
So I'm really excited to have you on, and I was blown away when you said yes, I'll come on. And I was just like, fantastic. So for the audience, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and just a bit about your background?
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me. I mean, it's totally it's terrific to be able to talk with someone about these kinds of things. And education is a concern worldwide. So my name's Sylvia Martinez, and there's so much to talk. There's so much to share about how I got to what I'm doing. The quick version is that I started my career as an aerospace engineer, and found myself, after having kids, being interested in education, went back to school, started working with companies that were creating educational software. So I published educational software for a while. I was a video game designer or programmer, and then I became president of a nonprofit called Generation Yes, which was working to help people understand how students could become part of your allies and advocates, part of your team in advocating for educational technology and doing tech support and being tech literate, so that we don't look as technology as something that you do to kids, rather that we're all working in this together. We're co-creating these experiences that we all want to become. We all want to be in schools. And then my partner and I, Gary, is Gary Stager. He and I wrote a book called Invent to Learn: Making Tinkering and Engineering in the Classroom, that really came out at the beginning of the maker movement becoming popular. And we wanted to try and build a bridge between what we saw as the very good instincts of the maker movement and what we actually know about education, and how parallel those things are. And that became known all over the world as kind of the Bible of the makerspace movement in classrooms. and it's taken me around the world, done professional development in from Italy to um, you know to Australia and everywhere in between, and it's been translated into 8 languages. I don't know if you can see above me
Mhm.
here. It's in
Yes.
Kurdish. It just got translated into Chinese. Uh,
Wow.
and so, we hope that it has an impact, and it helps create um, schools and other learning spaces that are more relevant, more connected to the real world, more open to students doing real things with real tools, collaborating with real people around the world, and just having a time in schools that's something that is as meaningful for every kid. It is meaningful to every kid, not just the kids who are good at school or the kids who are gifted academically, but every child should have an amazing education.
Mm. So you changed the way that I sort of was teaching at the time,
Wow.
and so going from the straight classroom to thinking about, well, how can I actually bring in technologies into when I'm designing a unit around history, or in as a technology teacher, how could I bring this in? And I started using different things like Lego, because we didn't have the deck out, technologies. So, getting kids to draw toys, for example, then building them, and then going on to Lego Designer, and then Scratch, and creating stories. So you really actually changed the way that I thought about education way back when. And so I want to ask you about, so I've gone into your blog and read
Thanks.
your
I hope
blogs.
it was a good
Yeah.
thing, good change.
Well, but do you know what? It's funny because people label me as digital technologies. Oh, you're very good with digital technologies. And I sort of always just chuckle because it's not that at all. It's very much what you talk about in terms of the tinkering. I just love to tinker and play, and that just makes me curious. So I always am surprised internally when people label me as a digital technology guru. And I'm just like, well, actually, we've all got it in us if we're just a little bit curious in things, in how things work. Um, so you actually have motivated me through one of your blogs, in terms of, so there's a couple of people this year that have sort of been pivotal in myself starting podcasting. And I've got to tell you, when I was thinking about it, I came across your article, your blog, back in 2020. You write about writing about learning and why that's important. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? So you talk about writing about learning, blogging, podcasting. Why is it important that people like myself just get out there and start talking about what's happening in education and what we're doing?
Um, it's funny. I think that people don't talk about things that they're very familiar with. And those are the very things we should be talking about. Everyone went to school, so everyone has these very similar experiences. So we don't talk about them, we don't question them. We don't talk about learning as opposed to teaching. We talk about how to do things, how a teacher can do things differently in a classroom. Well, sometimes you don't learn what's being taught. And it's not that there's a lack of communication or it's the student's fault or anything. It's just human nature. You learn by doing things, by participating in activities that you want to participate in, that you can deeply commit to, that happens in a community that cares about you and that you care about. And that's when learning happens. Learning happens inside the head of the learner. It doesn't happen, it's not an external thing. You can't do learning to kids. And so much of what we talk about in school is how do we teach differently? And then we sort of expect the learning to just happen. One of the reasons we wrote Invent to Learn is to talk about learning and to talk about connecting theories of learning to what happens in classrooms. And we wrote a lot about constructionism, which is Seymour Papert term for how learning happens, that learning is constructed on your existing knowledge, and it happens best when it's accompanied by things that happen external to you. So things that you can share, things that are important to you. And, uh, it could be technology. It could also be, a poem or a piece of art. But the learning happens when you're deeply involved in these things. And it's also based on this Piagetian idea that knowledge is a consequence of experience. If you don't have experiences, you're not learning. And if you don't have experience, you can't build on experiences to take steps and learn, more complex things. So, when we talk about things like digital technology, um, they're just new ways for kids to experience the world around them, to understand mathematical concepts, to think about beauty in the world, to express themselves. So it's not like, oh my God, we've invented this amazing new thing and it's off by itself. And we go to school and we learn math and science and English, and then we go do digital technology. These digital technologies are just part of the way we can express themselves, part of the things we can give to kids to let them express themselves and find their highest and truest potential.
Okay, so you've touched on pedagogy and you've brought a few names up. I'm just going to pose this question in terms of pedagogy. Is Makerspaces just a cool way to say free time?
So I don't think so. And I think it's I think it's been misunderstood. I think that some teachers think it means you just spread out all this cool stuff and magic happens. I think that's actually kind of insulting to teachers, because teachers do things that they study very carefully, they think about very hard, they choose their path, the ways that they introduce materials, the way they introduce projects. They can think about these things very carefully, and sort of pretending like it's just magic and it's all just happens without you doing it. It does a disservice to teachers who are trying to learn how to do these things. Project-based learning isn't new. The ideas of planning projects, developing projects, working on projects over time. If you just do a project once, you'll never learn what the pitfalls are, or where the kids went off track, what took too long, what you didn't spend enough time on. So all these things are a way for teachers to get better at doing something that looks like they're doing nothing.
I had to ask that question because, you do go into some classrooms and they talk about Makerspace, and it's very much that, first 15 minutes where if you look at it with, the non-understanding, for example, you walk into a classroom, you might just actually think that it's just playing, because the biggest thing, I guess, with Makerspaces and the theories behind it is you've got to allow that time for the students to actually explore and get frustrated and try and work things out, and they do that through that exploration without
Right.
the explicit teaching. But you do talk about project-based learning, which interests me, and you've made quite a few links. So let's just say I go into a school and they've got a dedicated makerspace, and then they've got a dedicated STEM space. For me, my thinking is what are you doing here? Like, do you actually understand the pedagogy behind learning and teaching? And why are we separating it? What do you wonder about when you walk into a school and you've got those mixed sort of signals, I guess, in terms of the spaces?
Well, I think the mixed signals translate to the teachers as mixed signals. They translate to the kids as mixed signals. You do STEM here, but not there. You do maker here, but it's not STEM. And it can be confusing. And, the kids and teachers always work around these things. They'll figure out how to use the time and space as best they can in most cases. I have a lot of actually have a lot of confidence in teachers when they're given the time and space to work things out. I think most teachers want school to be interesting. I think most teachers like kids. They're trying to do the best job they can. And I think when given a little bit of guidance and you take away some of these mixed signals, good things can happen. When we wrote the book, um, a lot of people said, well, schools will never change. This will never take off in schools. Schools, it's always status quo. And I thought, well, who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. But I've seen so many schools change completely because people care deeply about their kids. They care deeply about what happens in school, teachers, parents, administrators. And when people come together with a singular focus and don't get distracted by like, well, we have a makerspace and a library and a tool library and an art studio. And, it's like, if you don't get distracted by those things and you sort of consolidate your efforts into focusing on creativity and letting kids actually create things and thinking hard about maybe there's some time that's being wasted, and how do you recapture time for students to do more work that's relevant and deep. When people care about those hard questions, they solve them. And I can't tell you how many the schools came up to me and said, we never thought this would happen, but here we are, we're doing these amazing things, and look what our kids are doing. And hooray.
Yes.
Hooray for them.
You're right. So, there's a lot of good intent there, and there's a lot of good ideas, just bringing that together. So it's more about redesigning the learning, isn't it? In terms of, okay, let's actually sit down and talk about, the pedagogy behind it, and how can we, if you're in the makerspace, we're still in this framework where we're going through the engineering process, and it might be STEM-based or project-based learning, but tying that all together. So what is key when you're working with schools and leaders in terms of redesigning the learning? What are the key questions or key actions that you need to probably be thinking about in a school?
Oh gosh, that's a really big question, obviously, because the answer is like everything, and you can't do everything at once. You can't say, okay, we're going to revamp our leadership model and change the culture and, change the timetable, and all the teachers are going to now do something completely different. And it's just overwhelming. So, one of the things when we work with schools, we talk about is like, well, what are you good at? What do you already do that we can build on? Instead of focusing on the negative, we don't have enough time, we're not doing the right things, we're letting the science is moving forward and we're not, negative. That's just, it's hard to get motivated to, if that's the place you're coming from. But a lot of schools have things that they're very proud of. They're proud of their community. They're proud of how they work with organizations in the community. They're proud of their theater department. They're proud of they win championships in debate. There's always something, and you can look at those successes and say, what are the keys to our success? It's hard work, it's dedicated people, it's focus on, eyes on the prize. You focus very narrowly on maintaining, the quality and inviting kids to participate in the process. And how do we extend those invitations to kids who maybe aren't participating in our Pride and Joy debate team or our award-winning robotics team? There's a lot of times where schools will say, well, we have Makerspace covered because, we have a team that goes to robotics competitions and they win. And it's okay, what about other than the 20 kids who are getting that experience, what similar experiences are the other kids in the school having? And how can we create a similar design, intense focus, community, pride? How do we create those kinds of things in other ways for other kinds of kids who may not feel comfortable taking a step into a very competitive, thing like that, where they may be interested in something artistic. It doesn't mean you can't have those kinds of experiences if you're interested in art or music or drama or math or, you know, anything else on the board.
Yeah. So one of the challenges I have, and you're passionate about girls in digital technologies and STEM and engineering. So one of the things that really frustrates me when you're in a co-ed school, for year 9, you know, it's the elective time where kids can start selecting electives. And quite often I might have a class of 20 boys and 1 or 2 girls. And, you know, in terms of getting girls interested, we all know that we have to start early on, and we have to, you know, pretty much promote that. But once they're in the classes, they're really engaged. How do you address that issue? Like, what are some things that, you know, could be done across the school in years 7 and 8, for example, so when they go to choose those electives, they're thinking about the STEM and the digital technologies and all of those sorts of things that we want them to start selecting, because they're very good at it.
So, you know, you've mentioned one of the biggest things. You have to encourage girls. You have to bring them in. You have to use the existing girls in your program to go out and visit with the younger girls and show that they, you know, no one wants to be the lonely only. I don't know if you've heard that term, but, you know, no one wants to be the only girl. It's just, you know, who wants that? You know, there's other kinds of things that attract girls, are things that are less competitive. Like, girls tend to, now look, you know, when I'm talking about this subject, I don't mean all boys, I don't mean all girls. There are girls that win science prizes. There are boys that are, you know, it's just in general, girls tend to take a step back when there's a big rush for materials. You know, if you don't have enough stuff, that's off-putting to girls. You know, if you don't, if it seems like there's going to be a race kind of a thing, that will cause girls to take a step back. You know, things like the perceived goal of the program is very important to girls. Girls will sign up for things that help others, you know, are perceived to be more altruistic and community-based. And boys will sign up just because something's cool, right? They want to play with the lasers or the robots or the drones or whatever. And girls tend not to sign up for if something's pitched that way. So, you know, there's kind of reverse opportunity, you know, there's opportunities that girls take more often. For example, girls who are good at things tend to be good at a lot of things, right? So girls tend to have more opportunities. They may be good at dance and math and engineering and debate and, you know, art. And so if they have to choose, they might say, you know what, the robots class is full of boys. You know, it's not at the top of my list. Boys who are good at things tend to be laser focused on 1 or 2 of those things. So it's kind of natural, you know, for girls, if girls have opportunities in other places, they take them. So timetabling is super important, making it possible for girls to be in multiple things or transition in and out of things without penalty. You know, in a lot of schools, if you don't commit permanently to something, you don't get another opportunity. What happens to a girl who finds out in year, you know, after 3 years of computer classes being offered that she might like to take that class? Well, where the only people in that class are the boys who've taken it for 3 years in a row, how does she make that choice? How can you as an administrator, as a leader, as a person who's scheduling this out, how can you invite girls to have new experiences you know, in a subject that they might be interested in, but might be interested in for a year or a semester or in trial with something else. So I think it takes creativity on the leader's part. I think it takes a willingness to ask hard questions and say, are we really serving all the kids that we can serve? And can we try new things? You know, if we try a new timetable and it doesn't work, oh my God, what could happen? It's a tragedy, you know, we'll never recover. No, you'll recover, it'll be fine, you know. But if you don't try, you might never, might never know.
Yeah, so many questions I want to ask you, Sylvia. You're very good at this space. I guess I do want to ask you about a time that you've been courageous, and I've got a feeling you've got many times that you've been courageous. Let's go there for a sec.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just any random, I don't feel like I've been super courageous. I think that I'm sometimes it's just because I say things that I think about. And you know, it's kind of funny, you know, you say that and people ask me all the time, like, oh, you're a girl in engineering, you must have been so courageous, you must have been so self-confident, you must have been. And it's like, no, I wasn't at all. I was not courageous or self-confident or anything. In fact, I kind of just, if people were telling me that girls weren't allowed to do stuff, I'm kind of just didn't hear it. I'm maybe it's just because my inability to take clues from the world around me. I was not a self-confident kid, you know. I was good at what I was good at, and people encouraged me, and I had some amazing, wonderful teachers who said, well, you can do that. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, I think for a lot of kids, it's not a matter of being courageous. It's a matter of being invited to things, of having people look at you and really talk to you and ask you and say, what do you want to do? What do you want to try? Being there for kids makes them have the courage to do things that they wouldn't otherwise, you know, try. I mean, some kids are just like, they'll try anything, you know, and other kids, I think they need to be invited in. And I credit, I have had teachers throughout my life who were, you know, who looked at me and saw me. And I think that made me try things that I wouldn't have ever thought were possible.
I love that. I've got chills. I hope every teacher listening invites all of their students and looks at them and talks to them. So yeah, no, that was beautiful. So in terms of I guess final words for teachers and even students and parents, something that they should be thinking about. You talked about, you know, just then you were invited to participate. What is something that you want everyone to think about?
I think that, you know, when people talk about these new technologies, yes, it's new, but it's not different from any other kind of experience we hope kids have in school. We want kids to be empowered. We want them, and you know, a lot of people talk to me all the time and they're like, oh, digital technology, it's so empowering for kids. They click on stuff, they know how to use their phones. And it's like, that's not what I mean. You know, that's not really what I'm talking about. I mean, kids are empowered by by doing powerful things, by participating in meaningful experiences, meaningful to them, being able to share them in a community that values them. You know, we talk about digital citizenship all the time. And for a lot of schools, it means telling kids what not to do and how you'll be punished if you do some terrible thing. But citizenship is a two-way street. Citizenship means that I value you and you value me. And we have to be able to create those communities of trust and responsibility in schools, and, you know, start putting away this idea that we're just pouring knowledge into kids' heads and they're just these empty vessels that just receive knowledge and don't have these deep emotional lives. I mean, I'm constantly thrilled when I talk to kids, and they're so smart, and they're so alive, and they're so hopeful and vibrant, and I feel great about the future. I feel optimistic when I talk to kids, and we have to allow those qualities to show up in school too, and give them things to care about, because kids care deeply. They care deeply about the future. It's their future. I mean, of course they care about it. All the problems in the world are going to belong to them. Bless their hearts, you know. So but we don't have to make school a place where they turn off their brains and turn off their phones and turn off their caring and just plod through the day answering questions and filling out, you know, tests. I think we waste so much potential when we don't invite the full child to the table in every way.
Perfectly said. Thank you so much for coming on to Courageous Dialogues.
Thank you.
Are you coming to Australia anytime soon?
I hope so. That's a favorite place in the world. And it's a fantastic place. And, you know, this COVID mess has just been so frustrating.
How's it going there at the moment? I've turned off looking at the news and stats and numbers and all
so
of
the
that
US,
sort of
in a lot of places in the US, people have declared that COVID is just over. And yeah, it's a little scary, you know, that us not really taking the science seriously and caring for each other could result in much longer term course of this disease, more variations, you know, springing up, and more distance, more closures, and that makes me feel sad.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm gonna in about 6 to 12 months, I want to do a series where I dig a little bit deeper. So I might touch base with you again.
Sure, absolutely.